Hi, this is Mark Farnham with Apologetics for the Church and another Every Believer Confident podcast. And with me today is Jeff Mindler, our research assistant.
Good to be here.
And today we're going to be talking about when should you stop trying to have gospel conversations with someone? At what point do you recognize this is not productive and this is leading to frustration and I'm spending time and effort on this person and it's going nowhere? So, Jeff, any initial thoughts?
Yeah, I know the impetus for discussing this was it's a very common question that I get from fellow church members, from students. I'm sure you do as well. But this question of, how long, how patient should I be with somebody? I'm talking with them. I'm just not sure if I'm getting through. So how much time do I dedicate, and when do I know if it's time to move on? I've gone as far as I can and I'm just not sure, that our conversations are beneficial. And so where is that line of, trying to continue versus, kind of washing your hands of things and moving on? And it's a very good question that requires a lot of thought. So that was the impetus behind thinking through these issues.
Yeah, sometimes because we love the person that we're talking to, or we just fervently desire for them to be saved, we could spend all our time and effort and emotional energy and prayers trying to see this person come to Christ. And yet, if they're not even close, we could deceive ourselves and start to even compromise the truth just to bring them closer. I think about occasions where I've had students who have found an unbeliever or have an unbeliever in their life, and they get excited about apologetics, and they want to put it into practice, but not realize that this person may not have any interest whatsoever. And so they spend so much time starting conversations, having conversations, sometimes even begging that person to become a Christian, and they are not acknowledging the sad truth, which is this person is not interested, in which case they've got to resort, as I often say, just pray for them. Trust that God will in the future open up the door and get them interested. But if they're just playing with you and toying with you and not willing to actually reason, then this is not worth your effort. Go find someone who is interested.
Yeah.
So as you've experienced this, what are some of the indications that a person is really not interested, the Holy Spirit is not drawing them, and you're wasting your time?
Yeah, there's a couple. And in my own experience, a little bit of a different scenario where, and people will experience this as well, of someone who maybe they're more antagonistic in their demeanor. And so it's not that they're not interested, it's just they can't be reasoned with. You ask them questions and they refuse to answer the questions that you're asking them. And you realize, I'm not sure we're going to get anywhere here because I'm trying to engage, trying to dialogue, and people refuse to answer the questions. So I think that's one sign. If you're trying to have a conversation with someone and you're trying to, ask some questions to maybe uncover what they believe about a certain thing, to drive that conversation down the road a little bit more, and they're just refusing to answer, and they talk over you, perhaps that's another usually pretty good sign, is that they don't let you get a word in. So those are some signs of maybe a more antagonistic side of things, as opposed to the person that's maybe more apathetic and just not interested.
And you mentioned in dialogue with someone, asking them to define their terms, and they didn't want to define their terms. That's a good indication right there. If you're debating with someone about an issue and you ask them to define the term justice or godliness or integrity or truth or virtue or whatever it might be, and they are not interested in doing that, then you're dealing with someone who you can't make any progress with, because they will continue to use the term as they perceive it. And in some sense, that meaning is hidden to you because they won't show you what they mean by that.
Right.
And as a result, then you really can't go any further than that.
Yeah. I think too, another indication is, and this is harder to do online, which is why I'd recommend, if you're going to have these meaningful conversations, do everything you can to have them in person.
Absolutely.
Or at minimum in a phone call, because there's so much lost in online, with just a translation and not being able to communicate effectively. And so one thing you do get, in person is the person's kind of emotions. And if somebody is getting more heated and angry, that could be a good sign to, all right, let's try to tone down or diffuse this situation. And if they continue to get more and more angry, that could be a good sign to say, you know what, I think our conversation, it's no longer fruitful. Let's take a step back, let's try this again, at a later time. If you know the person, that would be ideal, but sometimes it's just, beneficial to walk away. So gauging, where is this person emotionally?
And maybe even asking a question like, why does this make you so angry to talk about? Help people process their feelings. And maybe you'll understand better, or maybe they'll realize, because I don't have a good argument for this, but I believe it firmly. Or something along the lines of, because your inability to see my point shows me you are a hateful bigot. In which case, then you realize this is a person whose argument rides very highly on emotion, and you have to try to bring that down. Let's just talk about this, okay? We're not going to change the world right now. No one's life is at stake, but I want to understand you, and I want to hear you, and I want to respond to you to try to calm the situation down.
Yeah. And that can be, it takes a lot of wisdom in the situation to know that, because typically for believers, we're engaging folks because we want them to come to a saving knowledge of Christ. We want them to believe in the good news of Jesus Christ and embrace that. And so there's that high level of urgency. And so sometimes it can feel like, oh man, I've failed. If I can't, get this person to see things the way I see it, a lot of Christians can see this as a failure. And so I think we need to address that as well, of like proper understanding of, this is why having a biblical understanding of conversion, regeneration, everything that's involved with that is so helpful, because we can go away from that situation and maybe it didn't go ideally how we wanted it to, but I think it was Greg Bonson's, we can't change the heart.
Right.
And so even if a conversation did not go the way that, we envisioned it, or ideally, or, just emotions were running high and they were very unreasonable, we can still pray. Yeah. And we should pray and pray, Lord, I could not convince this person, but you can. I can't change their mind. I can't change their heart, but you can.
And that shows as Jeff said, a biblical view of salvation. Sometimes we can become so invested emotionally in trying to reach a person that we start to think it depends upon us and our persuasiveness, when God uses our arguments and our witness and our life and testimony, but it does not depend upon us, and we can't make someone believe. So this is where, as much as we love the unbeliever and long for them to be saved, we can't let this become our obsession. Right? This is in God's hands. And the truth is, God may have you play a part in sharing the gospel with them and breaking down their unbelief, but it may necessarily be another person. It may be, let's say this is your close friend and she can't hear this from you. Or this is your brother and he can't hear this from you. You do your part, but trust God that he'll bring someone else into their life to speak the truth. Whether it's they land on a podcast, they find a gospel tract in the gutter, they find a YouTube video that grips them. Realize it doesn't have to be you who leads them all the way to conversion. That's God's job. And as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 3:7, he who plants and he who waters will receive their reward. Yeah. And so we have to trust the salvation of the unbelievers in our life with the Lord ultimately.
Yeah. And perhaps a good illustration of this would be, if you're talking with somebody that is fits into this category where they're just they're hardened against the gospel. If you think about, a brick wall, and there's just almost feels impenetrable at times. But if you come along and maybe all you do is you're able to just loosen one of those bricks. Maybe that's all. You weren't able to get the wall to fall so that, there's a clearing of obstacles to the gospel. You weren't able to get that far, but maybe what you were able to do is just loosen up one of those bricks. And then someone comes along, down the road, loosens up another brick, loosens up another one, and the wall of unbelief eventually comes down. But you played a small part of that. Someone had to loosen that first brick up maybe.
Yeah.
And on our end, it looks like, oh man, I didn't feel like I really got anywhere or did much. And yet, if that first, brick hadn't been loosened, then the wall wouldn't have come down later. And, we entrust those things to the Lord, that, Lord, use me as a faithful witness as far as I can go, but you're going to ultimately do this, and we can trust in his sovereignty to do that.
Yeah, that's good. I can think of at least one other time that you should not continue to press the discussion. And that is if you discover in the midst of your conversation that the person it's experiencing some failure of mental clarity. I was in a coffee shop downtown in Lancaster a few years ago and started a conversation with a woman. And as we were talking, like every time I would say something, she would have an odd response, but she was engaging with me. And I finally noticed that she had a hospital bracelet on her wrist. And I said, "Oh, were you in the hospital?" She goes, "Yes, I was in the behavioral health or mental health ward for a few days." And I'm like, that makes so much more sense. This is a woman who's suffering from cognitive problems, and therefore this odd conversation makes so much more sense now. And of course, I did not continue to argue with her because she was not thinking clearly, but I, told her about Jesus and, went on my way. But if you sense that, and this happens sometimes when you witness to people who are drunk.
Yeah.
You can only go so far, and you realize, I'm not sure that the next morning this person will remember this conversation or feel the same way.
Right.
I remember doing a funeral 20-something years ago when I was a pastor. And after the funeral, one of the guys, the man who died was his friend, and he was already drunk. And I went to the reception, and we talked and made real spiritual progress. He was a police officer. I'd known him for several years, and I thought, this is great. And he said, "Can we talk again tomorrow?" And so I contacted him the next day, and he was not interested once he got sober. And that was so sad.
Yeah.
But you just have to remind yourself that whatever opportunity God gives you, he can use that in their life. We don't know how or when that will be, but all we can do is play our part.
Yeah. And a lot of this, there's a lot of wisdom that, that just through experience, and practice, the more that you do this, the more wisdom the Lord will give you to be able to recognize when these situations emerge where you go, okay, I think it's time to, wrap things up, entrust it to the Lord. And so, there's really no substitute for experience and wisdom. And oftentimes wisdom comes through experience.
Yeah.
So, but the Lord gives generously. So we ask him for wisdom, and he gives it generously.
And the truth is, sometimes you might have conversation you don't think is going anywhere. And then that person indicates that they'd like to talk again. For a number of years, I used to have coffee on a regular basis with the founder of the local atheist group here in Lancaster. And sometimes I thought, I don't think I'm getting anywhere with him. He's trying to convert me to atheism. And sometimes I thought, okay, this is the last time we're doing this. And then he would always say at the end of our time, like, "This was fun. Let's do it again." Like, okay, fine. We'll do it again. I'm not enjoying this. I don't know if it's going anywhere, but again, I have to trust that the Lord could be using that in his life. I know in recent years, he's gone through some hard times. And who knows, maybe through the testimony of me and many others in the years he lived in this area, that the gospel seeds were planted and maybe they'll take root.
Yeah. And that's what we pray for.
That is.
And we entrust that to the Lord Lord, use the time that we had together, would the seeds that were planted bring someone to water them? But Paul says in that text, 1 Corinthians, it's the Lord that gives the growth.
That's right.
So we come before him and humbly request with boldness that, Lord, would you provide the growth here?
Yeah. So I hope that's encouraged you today. If you encounter a situation where you're starting to wonder, should I continue on in this? Pray about it. Pray and see if God leads you to. There's other times more recently where I thought, I'm not sure that these efforts are going anywhere. And then very soon after thinking that, God made it clear, oh no, I'm working in this person's life. But if they're impossible to deal with and they will not reason, it may be time to move on and devote your efforts to someone else. So I hope this helps. May God bless you as you continue to seek opportunities to engage unbelievers with the gospel. If you enjoyed this video and would like to find more resources on apologetics, go to apologeticsforthechurch.org.